he scored goal!
This is their house, this is their stage, it's the stage they have dominated in recent years.
It was written in the stars!
This is the Commentators Podcast. My name is Ricardo Chambers, and as usual, it is my pleasure to introduce maybe I should just allow him to introduce himself.
Yes, because apparently I'm someone who needs no introduction, right, Ricardo Chambers?
You need a lot of introduction. Who are you again?
My name is Donald Oliver. How things?
I am great. I'm really good. We've just come off the biggest sporting event in Jamaica.
Yes.
It is, right? The ISSA Kennedy Boys and Girls Athletics Championship.
Biggest high school event in the Western Hemisphere, yes.
Yeah.
In the world, probably, yes.
Yeah. There were no fans this year, by the way, but I would like to think it was still epic. You could say we had a pan-epic champs.
Womp, womp.
Warm.
Wow. you thought about that all day?
All weekend, actually. Took me 3 days, bro.
All the 3 days, man.
3 days.
Well, you deserve a round of applause.
Thank you.
All right,
thank you.
pandemic.
I tell you who else deserves a round of applause.
Who?
Edwin Allen for winning the girls' title, and Jamaica College, after 11 years, 10 years in the wilderness, they won the boys' title. Also, I would like to say congratulations to the Intersecondary School Sports Association, ISSA, for first of all getting the go-ahead to put on champs and then putting on a wonderful event outside of a few mistakes made by the officials. But we're not going to talk about that. We're talking about the good things here.
Yes.
But before I go any further, I just want to remind you of the conversation we had about a year ago.
You think I remember that?
I don't think you remember what you had for breakfast, but that's why I'm going ahead to remind you.
Please.
Yeah.
How about the breakfast?
No.
Okay, sorry.
A year ago.
Oh, fine, sure. Let's go.
So there was a conversation we had a year ago about the events that could potentially be held in Jamaica. And remember I said that I thought if there was any event that could be held, major event that could be held with the pandemic, it would be champs.
I thought you said table tennis.
No. It was the ISSA President Keith Wellington who spoke to different sports being put into categories as to when they could resume, and table tennis was somewhere there.
All right.
Yeah, but part of the reason I thought champs could be held is because of the global appeal. And I thought if there was any event that could pull in the type of sponsorship to be able to do the testing that would be required, to do the bubbles or the mini bubbles.
All the logistics.
Yeah, all of the logistics to make it happen, it would have been champs. And here we are celebrating a victory for sport in Jamaica because we did have the ISSA Kennedy Boys and Girls Championship. So congratulations to everyone involved, from ISSA to the schools, because they had a tremendous part to play as well. They had to be so disciplined to ensure that it happened. And yeah, it was great. I think it was a great 5 days.
I was most pleased with the athletes, of course,
because
missing champs 2 years. Mentally, I was wondering.
They missed 1 year.
Yeah, but if this hadn't gone ahead, it would have been 2 years. Mentally, I'm not sure how they would have, recovered from that.
Yeah.
Because to prepare for these championships, a lot of these athletes actually took the entire 2 years just to be a part of this one. So I was especially happy for them.
Yeah, great. That's not exactly what we're going to be focusing on this episode, though. Today we're talking about champs, but the champs schedule. Is it time to create a more athlete-friendly champ schedule? Just to say, we will not be the first to discuss this issue, but it never gets old. And as ISSA was forced to make changes to the schedule for the 2021 edition, we feel there is no better time to reignite this conversation. Another question to be answered: did they get it right in 2021? Shortly, we'll give you a brief overview of the major changes. We will have several guests on today's show, including one of the greatest athletes to compete at champs, Anisha McLaughlin, now will be. Didn't appear that the schedule affected her too much though, at least not while she was competing for Homewood Technical. Also on this episode, Jeffrey Gordon, former manager of the Wilmers Trust High School for Girls, now manager of the St. Jago High girls team. Great second place finish for them at Champs. He's also been manager of national junior teams, and maybe his most valuable contribution to the sport is his work as lifelong mentor of multiple world and Olympic champion Shelley Fraser-Pryce. Also on today's show, the big man himself, the president of the Inter-Secondary School Sports Association, for a record third time on the Commentators Podcast, Keith Wellington.
He's leading the rest by far.
By far. It's a star-studded cast today, so let's get to it. And let's quickly point out some of the key issues. 200-meter heats being contested before the 100-meter heats. Athletes doing the 100, 200, and by the way, this second one has to do with the previous schedule and not the one that was used for Champs 2021. But athletes doing 100, 200 having to run 4 individual races before they get to their first final, the 100 final. Should the track finals be more evenly spread over the 5 days like we saw at the 2021 championships? Can we avoid the 200, 400 finals on the last day of the championship? So many questions. Let's start our discussion. We'll start with Keith Wellington, the president of the Inter-Secondary School Sports Association. Mr. Wellington, welcome, Mr. Record Breaker, in more ways than one. How are you doing?
Good morning, Donald. Good morning, Ricardo, Jeffrey, and Anisha. I'm good.
First of all, let me ask you, how was the schedule received in 2021, given that for the first time you did not have all the track finals on Friday, on Saturday, or most of the track finals on Friday and Saturday, but they were more evenly spread out, with the 100 finals on Thursday, the 2000 steeplechase finals starting the championship, the 1500 finals on Thursday as well, and then on the Saturday having the 200, 400, along with the 800 and the relays, 3,000, 5,000. What type of response, reaction have you gotten to the 2021 schedule?
Well, I think for the most part, the response was positive, excepting for the last moment when apparently some coaches actually looked at it and then they recognized that there was an issue with the 4-8 double in particular. I think that was the biggest complaint that we had. And then there was the issue of the 200 starting on Tuesday and then not competing again until Friday, Saturday. I think those were the two negatives highlighted. But generally, I think that persons thought that the schedule was, well, the direction in which we were going with in terms of the schedule is something that we need to look at in terms of when things return to some semblance of normalcy, if we would want to keep some of the changes and make further adjustments along those lines.
Mr. Wellington, were you open to feedback? Because you seemed a little bit surprised that you got such a late reaction from some coaches.
Yes, I was a little bit surprised. There were 2 prominent coaches involved in the schedule. We actually sent the schedule for review. So we would have made a number of changes to the schedule, starting with the ranking system, and therefore making the schedule based on the qualification system that we were now using. We had representatives from the Coaches Association. As a matter of fact, we invited the coaches from all the different regions to participate in the process. But as I said before, the issue of the 4-8 double, and I will concede that it's a very challenging schedule. But we didn't get that feedback until the weekend before, which is something that we have always found to be an issue. A lot of our people don't read, not just in track and field, but generally, you put something out there and nobody pays it any attention until the last minute. But I think that, as the concern was valid, but we have to bear in mind, we talk about avoiding certain events, and some of them are valid. When you look at it, you have the 1-2 double, you have the 2-4 double, you have the 4-8 double, you have the shot put double, shot put high discus double,
yeah.
You have the triple jump, long jump double, and all of that has to be done within within a specific time frame. We look at what's happening with the Olympics and Miller Weber wanting to do the 2-4 double. All of these things are going to happen. You're not going to be able to satisfy every single combination. But what we wanted to do was to put it out there so the coaches knew what was on the table and then make a choice, because the truth is the choice ultimately rests with the coach and the athlete. Do they have to do the double? No, they don't. And I think in this particular instance, this year in particular, we have been at pains to point out that yes, we want a good meet. Yes, we want a competitive championship, but points cannot be the be-all and end-all of this year's championship. We were restricted in terms of the times that were allowed. So, for example, another thing that I would not have been totally happy with, but we may not have been able to avoid, was the morning sun doing the 1500s, for example. Those are things that we had to concede and accept that these were challenges that we had to just accept and move on. And for the most part, all the stakeholders accepted and worked with what we were able to put together. But we are open to suggestions, and we will continue to make improvements with the Champs product going forward so that more persons can be satisfied and foremost, the students can be protected.
Well, one thing I can tell you, Mr. Wellington, you won't be short on suggestions by the end of this podcast. I also want to say to you, you might want to be careful how you use that Miller-Weber situation, because although the IOC did not fit in that 200-400 double into their schedule for the Tokyo Olympics, the IAAF, World Athletics, has already fitted that into the schedule for the World Championships to be held in Eugene next year, pretty much showing...
And we know that Michael Johnson had that opportunity, but the point I wanted to make is that scheduling is not just about fitting in the events. You also have to take into consideration other factors. In ISSA's situation, right?
Yes.
You're talking about a restriction of 4 or 5 days. You're also talking about Champs being not just an athletic event, but actually an event itself and a fundraiser. So you want to do scheduling and things, bearing some of those things in mind. But of course, you want to prioritize the health of the student athlete. We have also we have gone to the point where if Anisha was competing now, or Junelle Brumfield, or the Samuels or the Blakes from States or the Carlos Samuels, they wouldn't be able to do what they would have done in their time in terms of competing in that number of events. So we are evolving, and we're trying to get to the point where more and more persons can be satisfied. But it takes time and it takes resources.
Yeah, we'll get to some of that in a little while. Let's invite Jeffrey Gordon to the conversation. First of all, Mr. Gordon, congratulations to your team St. Jago on putting up a really good fight at Champs 2021, finishing in second position, beaten by Edwin Allen, but a really great fight. Congratulations. How did you view this year's schedule? First of all, when was the first time you saw the schedule, and did you have issues with it?
Thanks much, Ricardo, for the expressing congratulations to the great work that our team did. Our coaches have to take the credit for that. And I just want to put it out there that we actually competed with only 43 girls.
Wow.
To cover 46 events. To cover 46 events, which includes 6 relays. But we got it done for the most part. We had a couple of issues with injury. I'll say it openly on this podcast that I think one of them was a direct result of some incompetence by the officials. And, I make no apologies for that. And unfortunately, the young lady got hurt.
And you're talking Binga in the 80-meter hurdles, having to rerun that final.
That's correct. And sometimes they had to rerun without having the opportunity to cool down and come back. It's asking some athlete's body to do too much. Because once you compete, then there's a process that you go through, to be able to go and compete again. And for the athletes, all of them have to be out there for, I'm not quite sure, maybe a little bit under an hour, 40 minutes, without going through the usual routine after competing, that created an issue.
Yeah.
But anyway, as it is, I must commend. The thing is that the scheduling this year has opened the door, I think, for ISSA now to make some long-term changes. Since 2017, I've sat down basically in detail and looked at the schedule, and I've had some recommendations that I think that they should be done to the schedule to ensure that athletes are preserved in a better way. And also, believe it or not, I thought that the scheduling that I had in mind would also help ISSA to earn some more at the gates. What this did was that we had finals from day one, and I think that was a great thing. That this showed us that we can do something different from more than we have been doing in the past, which is packing all the track finals basically into the last 2 to 3 days.
Yeah.
The field events were fine. I don't have any issue with the field events, but you mentioned it at the start. I don't think from ever since it's been a case where kids have to be running the 1, 2, 4 events, and some of them actually run 5 because if they run the 4x1 for their team, which I'm sure some of them do, basically they are running 5 events before they run a final. And I really think that's really, asking too much. So the main suggestion I have is 2, really. We have to, I think we should do the 100 meters over the first 2 days of the championship.
Yeah.
What would happen, in my opinion, is that on the Wednesday, once we get back to normal, on the Wednesday, you're going to have a full stadium because everybody's going to come out to watch 100-meter finals, no matter what. And the 200-meter semifinals, as was done this year, would fill that gap on a Friday night, because we have seen in the past some terrific performances in the 200-meter semifinals. I remember one year, I think I had 5 or 6 boys in the class 1 200 ran below 21 seconds.
Yes. I think that was 2014, that year that you had the likes of Minzy and Janelle Hughes and Martin Manley, Javon Francis, that group. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and one actually ran 21 flat.
Yeah.
Right. So it is showing that there's a lot of excitement even in the 200-meter semis.
Yeah.
So we can get the 100 meters out of the way.
Yeah.
And without doubt, my other recommendation is to remove that 400 meters from Saturday. That could be run maybe concurrently with the 100 meters, where you could have 1 round Tuesday, 1 round Wednesday, 1 round Thursday. But then there'll be other things that you'll have to shift around.
Yes.
It's not just moving them, but there are other things that will have to be shifted around to accommodate, these moves. And I think they can be worked out amicably for this to happen. So I think, as I said, having done this schedule this year, with some tweaking and fine tuning, then we can use that going forward to, when things come back to normal next year. And I'm saying when, I'm not saying if.
Yeah. Hold it right there. Have a couple of questions for both yourself and Keith Wellington, but let me bring in Anisha McLaughlin Wilby. Anisha thrilled us at Champs, running 100, 200, 400. Not all of them at one championship, but she did one double or another, 100, 200, 200, 400. Anisha, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me.
You're always wonderful. So it's great to hear. Let me start by asking you about when you did that 100, 200 double in your time. It was a little bit different then, because I think the 200 semifinals you did on a Saturday morning back then, as opposed to a Thursday night as the previous schedule had it before 2021. What were the difficulties in doing that double from your standpoint?
Well, you asked me about the 100, 200 double. I only did that once, my last year
Class
in high
1.
school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so from first year, class 3, I always do the 2-4 double, but it's the same schedule. It wasn't really difficult for me per se, because the fact is that you already know the schedule. as opposed to this year, the coaches didn't have that schedule at the beginning of the season. So for us, we were conditioned to do all of those rounds because the coaches knew beforehand that this is what the schedule is like. So I didn't really find it difficult, and I actually enjoyed the 1-2 double because that's less work for me. So I really enjoyed that double. It wasn't really difficult. Even doing the 2-4, it wasn't difficult because on a Saturday morning at 9 a.m. we would come for the 200-meter semifinals. Then we would have opening ceremony, and then about 1:30 we would have the 400 finals. That's basically about 3 hours to recover, and then another 3 hours between the 400 finals and the 200 finals. It's just when you get to the 4x1s, now you have like a 2-hour recovery time and the 4x4. But as I said, we were normally conditioned to do these rounds, so it wasn't all that difficult. You would normally feel all of this when you finish the 4x4.
I was going to ask you about that quickly. So you talk about it not being difficult, and clearly you were super well conditioned, and so you were quite often so much better than the field. I'm sorry to have to bring this up, except that 200 with Simone Facey, but we're not talking about that. But after you finished your high school career, did you at any point feel that it might have been too much, especially over a 5 or 6 year period?
To an extent, I guess with the injuries, because for me, as you talk about that 200 meters in 2004, I think that year I got my first major injury. So I went to champs not fit. And since then, I had recurring injuries, especially with the hamstring. So I think all of that competition for over the 5 years in the high school system, it do in fact have an impact on you when you get to the professional level. And that is my belief. It does have an impact because the injuries, once I got that injury, I just kept on having injury issues. If it's not my hamstring, it's my knee or something.
So are you now an advocate, Anisha, for athletes not to do both relays and possibly an individual event on the final day or on one day?
Yeah, 200, 400, and then both relays.
I am an advocate for that because, I mean, in the classroom, we now have student-centered teaching and learning. So I think for champs, when we're setting up the champ schedule, it should be athlete-centered because at the end of the day, you want them to perform and you want them to be healthy. So I like the fact this year that the fact that we had finals beginning at the first day. I like that idea, but as Mr. Wellington spoke about the 4-8 double, and you know, those are the traditional doubles at champs. I didn't like that setup at the time, but I think it was on the coaches to now sit down and select which event they should send their athletes to do. I did not like the fact that I saw athletes out there doing the 2-4 double and the 4-8 double, and the fact that they had such short recovery time. And on top of all of that, they were not being competitive throughout the season as they are normally accustomed to. So you realize that you have quite a few of the sprinters got injured and stuff like that during these champs. And I think that contributed to it because they're not competing. So now that you're in this environment, competitive environment, you're actually pushing your body to an extent that is not accustomed to. And that results in injury.
Mr. Wellington, I'm going to transition to you now. Has it ever come across in your thinking that certain doubles could be banned in the near future?
Well, we have not had that discussion. But while I'm here listening, and Anisha said it, we give the coaches the power of choice, right? And we expect some level of maturity and concerns. You look at Sachin Dennis, for example. You rarely see Sachin. Well, you're going to probably tell me you rarely see him running.
well, you said it. You said it, Mr. Wellington.
but seriously, one of the things that we have said, and it may not have always been that case, but over time, what we have said is that, listen, points are important, but the most important thing is the development of the youngster, right? And we have not come to the point where we are going to rule who should run what. Coaches really have to make some choices. For us as schedule, we can only do a schedule that is going to be a general schedule without, yes, we'll take into consideration some popular choices, But if you look at the 100, for example, if we do the 100 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it means that we have to move the sprint hurdles away from Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yes,
and if
it does. But here's the thing.
One second. If you move the sprint hurdles, and I'm not saying it can't work, and I'm just telling you some of the thought process that we'll have to go into it.
Yes.
If you move sprint hurdles to, let us do it Friday, Saturday, where it is now. Then now you have to also think about the 4 hurdles.
But hold on, Mr. Wellington. You could do the sprint hurdles on Friday, because as it was this year, you had heats and finals on the same day, which is quite practical for the sprint hurdles. And I think it worked this year. So you could do that on one day, which would be Friday. In fact, the sprint hurdles, along with the 200 semis, could become now your major events on Friday evening. And instead of having the flat 400 on Saturday, you could have the 400 hurdles final on Saturday, with the 400 hurdles heats coming on Thursday morning ahead of the 400 final on Thursday night. So there are some suggestions.
So go again. So you remember now, it's 3 rounds for the 400.
Yes, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay.
So 100, 400, because you're not expecting many individuals to be doubling 100, 400.
Right.
So you run the 100, 400s. 100s would go Tuesday, Wednesday. Your 400 would go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's your 3 rounds. So by Thursday, both your 100 and 400s are out of the way. On Friday, you do 2 rounds of 200s with your final on Saturday. You also have your sprint hurdles, both rounds on Friday, and the 200s, the semifinals, and the sprint hurdles, heats and finals become your marquee events on Thursday's penultimate day of the championship. Friday's penultimate day.
So tell me what you have on Saturday again?
So on Saturday, you would now have the 400 hurdles, the 200, your relays, your 3,000, and your 5,000. Plus, I think your 800 would remain on Saturday as well. So the 4 hurdles would now replace the flat 400 on Saturday. So you move away from those individuals who are doing 200, 400, having to run both those finals on Saturday, plus the 4x100 and the 4x400.
So Saturday would be your 200 finals, 4 hurdles finals,
800,
relays.
800, relays, 3,000, 5,000.
I hear your suggestion.
Okay.
I think Mr. Wellington just took
no. But listen, one of the things that anybody who knows me know is that I'm not afraid of changes. As a matter of fact, I thrive on changes because I think you only get better by changing things.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with changes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we're going to see changes. As a matter of fact, I said it during the championship that there are a number of things. Forget about pandemic. There are a number of things about champs that we will have to change. We have a number of traditionalists who think that some things should not change. And while we agree that some things should remain, you only improve by changing.
Yeah.
So
there's
I'm sure there will be changes.
Yeah, there's a specific question I have to ask before I move on. Would you be open to having the 100 finals on the second day of the championship, the Wednesday, and the 100s completed before the start of the 200s? Simple question.
All right, so I am open, and I think it is very, very likely to happen where the 100 will be, both the 100 and 200 will be completed as blocks of events separate and apart from each other. Yeah. Whether it is going to be a Wednesday 100-meter finals and Saturday 200-meter finals or some other way, I could not say no.
Yes,
but
understood.
Yes, there will be. I think there are likely to be some changes along those lines.
Are you concerned about ticket sales, Mr. Wellington?
We have to be champions.
No, but don't you think that you're in a more powerful position now than you were, I don't know, 15 years ago?
If we're in a
more powerful, more marketable position than you were 15 years ago?
Yeah, I think we are. But yeah, and ticket sales, yes, and we would want to ensure that it's not just tickets, but television. You have to think as well that Jamaica is not the US with 50 million people trying to get tickets. You're still restricted to an audience, well, a ticket-paying audience of a couple hundred, well, a few thousand working population. So all of these things will be taken into consideration. But of course, the priority will and has to be the health of the athletes. And so we will take all of those things into consideration.
Yeah, there's another issue.
Remember,
yes.
we often complain about sports as a business. This is one instance where it has to be considered a sporting activity with a business component.
Yeah, and we do understand that, and we expect that when you make your final decisions, that will be taken into account. We know already that Mr. Gordon feels that whichever day you have the 100 finals, that people will come out to watch the 100 finals. And so overall, you might actually end up selling more tickets over the 5 days than when you have majority of the finals packed into Friday and Saturday. Now, another thing that the pandemic forced us to change this year, and I'll start with Mr. Gordon on this one, is having a quota for each event. So 16 for the relays, well, most of them except the medley, which was open. 24 for some track events, 32 for some. I think there were a couple with 40, maybe not. I think 32 was the maximum. Let me start with Mr. Gordon. Going forward, should we be thinking more along these lines in terms of limiting the number of athletes who actually get to champs, which would make everything else, including the schedule, a little bit easier to manage?
Without doubt, Ricardo, that's the second thing that happened this year that I fell in love with. The first being the finals, starting from day one.
You fall in love easily, don't you?
Huh?
You fall in love easily, don't you?
Not really, but you know, it when you see something that makes sense to you, then obviously, you know, you want to support it as best you can. And the rankings really, I think, is the way forward also. Obviously, without the pandemic, you would increase the numbers that come to championship.
Yeah.
So say, for instance, you would increase the sprints from 32 to maybe 64, run 8 heats.
Yeah.
I mean, in the past, it has been painful.
80, 90.
You know, sitting through, I've seen once there was 21 or 22 heats for one event. You know,
at champs, really, are you sure that was champs?
Of course, you know, and high teens is a popular number. 18, 19.
Are you sure you're not mixing up with the development meets though? I think I've seen up to about 10 to 12 at champs at most, but I can't recall seeing more than that at champs. But at the development meets, yes.
Yes, that's for sure, you know, but the amounts that came, remember champs was all about qualifying standards.
Yeah.
Right. And once an athlete met the qualifying standards, they will be there.
Yeah.
They're in. Yeah. And so we have, you know, the worst event for me ever at champs is always the 400-meter heats.
Yeah.
Because you would have one good athlete in a heat, and then, you know, when that athlete wins, most of the time the other athletes are 50, 60 meters behind. So, yeah. I mean, I am supporting 100% the ranking system. As I said, I just expand the amount. For the field events, I would probably go with 24 and have two preliminary rounds of 12 each.
Right.
Yeah.
Other thing. You know, give more, obviously you want to give more athletes an opportunity, you know, to come to champs. But then, which probably will not be ISSA's purview. I think now the regional championships would have to step up their game and, you know, present something more appealing, you know, to what that is right now, I can't say, you know, so athletes can go to their regional meets and really perform and, you know, make that, and that would be the championships for some athletes, you know, the top ones. You know, I remember the Games Mistresses Association, who ran girls champs back in the day, they had that concept where I think, and don't quote me, but I think it was they had 6 regional meets, and the top 6 from each region came to championship. You know, so for ones that control the amount of athletes, the events could be spread out more. You know, you'll have more rest period in between events, etc., etc. You need to condense the championship like we had to do this year.
Yeah.
You know, so more athletes, just thinking about what happened previously under our regular championship. The 2, 4, 4x1, 4x4 events on a Saturday that used to spread out over something like 7.5 to 8 hours.
Yeah.
Even though,
but you don't want your sessions too spread though, because you want it to be entertaining for those who are in the stadium and for those who are watching on television as well. So you don't want to spread the events too far apart.
And there comes my problem. We who are out there investing in these athletes, all right? We think that, yes, it's important to put on the show, the sponsors, etc. It can't happen without them, but there has to be a bit more consideration on the athletes. There has to be a little more priority put on the well-being of the athletes in making these decisions.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a whole lot of investment put into these athletes to get them where they are.
Yeah.
And they are really the stars of the show at the end of the day.
Yeah, true. And I understand that. And I think that's why, for me, the discussion has to go along the lines of limiting the numbers. And I like your suggestion in terms of the number of athletes per event and so on. I would also say another way to do it is to increase the qualifying times. Even if you go back to the qualifying time system, let's take, for example, the Class 1 boys 100 meters. The qualifying time is like 11:54. No, I could run that.
No, you couldn't.
I could, Donald.
No, you move on though.
Yes, let's move on. But Mr. Wellington, let me get your take on this.
Yeah, Ricardo, I think the feedback that we have gotten with the ranking system and the quota for each event has been positive. We started last year. Last year we started to forge a closer relationship with the regions. So we actually reached out to them and we started to help them to organize in terms of sponsorship and funding for the regional meets. And what our intention, one of the targets that the new executive of ISSA set, has set long before the pandemic or before this pandemic, was that we wanted to integrate the regional meets as a part of the process, the champs process. And we already have partners on board who want it to be that way. So it is likely that going forward, what we're going to have is something along the lines of what we would have done this year. And like Jeffrey said, I think for me, my personal preference is to have a definitive number rather than the qualification time, to have a definitive, because it allows for better planning.
Yes.
Right. So if we and what I think it will do, for example, the Eastern region, I think we need to look at what's happening in the Eastern region in terms of talent and talent development. We would have made rules at ISSA that restricts movement, and so we have a duty to try and help them to develop. The quota system will allow their best athletes to participate at champs. And you know, if we support them with their regionals as well, it will help. So I think that is the direction that we're looking. And I don't think it will disenfranchise any of our top athletes. It will also encourage some of our weaker athletes and smaller schools, and will provide for us a more formal structure in terms of organization and definitive numbers for planning and all of that.
Yeah, and you're right, making it easier to set that schedule as well when you know.
Yeah, because right, you know exactly how much time you're going to need for the 100. As things stood before now, you could put aside an hour for the 100, and when the entries are closed, you realize that no, you need an hour and a half because you have 15 heats rather than 10.
Yeah.
So,
Anisha, let me get you in here. How do you feel about the quota system and having a set number of athletes for each event?
I am in total agreement with that because, as Mr. Wellington said, it allows you to plan better. And I mean, you're at a championship. It would be similar to on the international stage to go to the World Championship or the Olympics. You know that for the heats, you're going to have a set amount of heats. You're not going to see 10, 15 heats running. So when you set the quota, it will force the athletes to make that quota. And I think also with improving the qualification time, making it higher, I think that also will help. And for the regional championships, I like the fact that there have been some development compared to when I was in high school, because when we had central champs at Kirkvine, the most you will see 1 and 2 students come and support. So I like the fact that we have Sports Max on board and we are having it on TV and promoting it more. So when you develop it more, I mean, some athletes, most athletes, everybody won't make it to champs. But the fact that if you make it to a central champs or eastern champs, that would be like a mini champs for you. So I am in total agreement with developing the regional meets and making it more attractive.
Yeah. One more question I have for the panel, and I don't necessarily believe in this one, but I have to put it out there anyhow. Would we consider, well, one of two things, either using the entire Tuesday, because as it is now, well, with the exception of this year, we really only usually use half of Tuesday, or having a 6-day championship as opposed to 5. Mr. Wellington.
I don't foresee us going 6 days now.
Neither do I.
5 days, 5 days is a stretch. It takes a lot. You have to remember, not just from ISSA perspective. Last year, my accommodation bill was, if we had gone ahead with champs, would have been more than $1.5 million.
That's my meaning St. Elizabeth Technical?
States, right?
$1.5 million.
Just for them to sleep somewhere. So one of the good things about this year and the schedule that we had this year and what we're talking about is that schools, I had a smaller base in Kingston, and I had a bus coming into Kingston every day because we had people who were going to compete only once because their event was a 1-day event, or people who were competing today and not going to compete for another 2 days. So we have to think about the cost on the schools themselves as well as on ISSA. I think 6 days will be stretching it a little bit too much.
Yeah. Extending the Tuesday, is that a possibility?
That's always a possibility. That is a possibility. It wouldn't take much based on what we have to do.
Yeah. Mr. Gordon?
Definitely no 6 days.
Definitely. Okay. No to the 6 days. Okay. Anisha, no to the 6 days as well?
Yes, I said no to the 6 days. I think at one point in time, champs went down to 3 days, starting on a Wednesday after, was it after World Juniors? Yes.
You mean before it was combined?
No, after it was combined.
You sure it wasn't? I think there was a year when the stadium was being refurbished for World Juniors. That year it was 3 years. Sorry, 3 days.
Exactly.
And I think probably at 2 separate venues as well.
But remember, I know, Ricardo, it wasn't always 5 days.
Yes, I remember. That started in 2014.
Right.
It
was
3 days. 3 days was 2002 at GC Foster.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we had 4 days. So I don't think 6 days that's a lot, especially for like because you have to think about everybody, the whole team. So for the coaches and the management team to extend it to 6 days, I think that's a lot, and you have to think about the financial aspect of it as well. So I am in support of starting at Tuesday and earlier on. But I really don't like the morning competing in the sun. Oh my God, I was so sympathetic for the students running those 1500. They look like they just finished a marathon race in that heat.
Mr. Wellington.
That's where preparation came in, because you know it was going to be in the morning, so you had to simulate that. In training, you had to do a lot of simulation preparing for that. That was the only way we could have managed it.
Yeah, but you still don't have a lot of time to do, because I'm certain you did not get this schedule before or at the beginning of the season. So
you're correct. Yeah,
some people didn't have enough time, the regular time to train. So it was It was difficult to watch, honestly.
And you know, just on that note, that was the most difficult thing preparing for this championship, because when you prepare for a championship, obviously you start with the date of the championship and you work your way back. That's how coaches work out the training plan. You know, how to do the periodization and with the moving targets. Boy, the coaches really, really had to work for their money this year, so to speak. You know, to try to get their athletes peaking at the right time, you know, with the targets keep moving for the date and etc. So, you know, they did their job very, very well this year. Trust me, these coaches.
Yeah, one more, I think. How about defined morning and evening sessions like we have at the World Championships? Now, I know that usually with champs, there's probably like a little break sometime in the day, maybe an hour and a half. On most days, especially the second day, because the first day, the Tuesday, will be like half day, the second day, the Wednesday, and then the Thursday. Do we need to go as far as be thinking about, like we have at the Olympics and the World Championships, defined morning session, evening session?
I think each year, you know, we have some gap in between the first session and the second session, let me call it that. But it would be a good idea, I think, for morning and afternoon sessions. Again, scheduling determines how well we can do that. But that is something I would be in support of.
Yeah.
Mr. Wellington, just to expand on that point, right? Because I'm sure in the years to come, there will be more discussions in regards to events being run what is considered to be prime time, depending on who has the event and where they are broadcasting to. Of course, you're not just thinking about Jamaica, you're thinking about the region, you're thinking about the world. Are you mentally prepared for those discussions to have, like, you know, whether it be the Blue Ribbon events or the top events to be in a prime time slot in the evening/night?
I think that in the earlier part of our discussion, I did hint at that those are factors that have to be taken into consideration if we're talking about champs. We can't run away from the fact that champs is one of the biggest sporting entity/business in Jamaica.
Yeah.
And while it is students that are involved, the truth, it is the cream of our crop. Track and field is probably one of our biggest or most recognizable features as a Jamaican. And in order to maximize that particular aspect of our national life, we have to make the best use of it. And exposure is one of the things that helps to build that culture and that product. And if we are going to talk about media and media interaction, again, with the priority being students' health and student safety, we have to consider those as options, not just in the future, but now.
Yeah. We're almost out of time, but I'll give all three of my guests an opportunity to make their closing remarks. I will start with you, Mr. Gordon.
Well, first of all, I hadn't said it earlier, but Keith, I hats off to you, your organizing committee, and all the stakeholders who made it possible for champs to be held this year, because I really don't know what would have happened with track and field at the school level if champs had been postponed for a second year. And also, especially for the athletes who are leaving, you know, it gave them an opportunity to showcase and get, even though some of them might have had scholarship offers before, having come and perform, you know, their offers can now go up, so to speak, and they will have more opportunities to choose from different schools who might have not looked at them before. And so thanks a lot again to yourself, and you can pass that on to all the stakeholders who were involved.
You're welcome.
Yeah, man. The two items, I'll repeat, that I think we really have to go forward with is the ranking system and then the adjustments to the schedule. Ricardo, the breakdown you did was, I liked it, you know. You notice I never said I loved it, but I liked it. So, and, you know, I'm sure with that said, there will be some tweaking that need to be done.
Yes, for sure, without a doubt.
Right. So once Keith, you have a committee in place that's going to be looking at the schedule seriously, then I'm pretty sure it can be worked out, and it will make life easier for all of us going forward.
Yeah, Anisha, your final thoughts?
I just want to highlight and echo what Mr. Gordon said about the fact that the athletes got an opportunity to compete this year at Champs. So good job, Mr. Wellington, because I, myself, an athlete, I know what it is like, because even when you train, you want to go out there and compete and showcase your talent. So I'm very happy that the students got the opportunity to perform at Champs. And I am happy with the developments that have taken place. Champs from my days, I sound old saying this, from back in my days.
Our day.
Pardon?
Our day.
From my days till now, I'm really happy to see so much development and improvement, and I really look forward to the changes that will take place based on our suggestions, Mr. Wellington. I'm looking forward to the changes that will take place to further develop the whole Champs product.
Yeah. Mr. Wellington, your final thoughts?
Yeah, man, thanks, Ricardo. Thanks for having me and allowing Jeffrey and Anisha to be here to share their own ideas with us. And thanks for the sentiments, Jeffrey and Anisha. And I must also commend everyone. It's not just the organizing committee. I think we had over 1,500 athletes and team officials, which would be maybe more than 80% of the persons inside the stadium. I think that while we would have put our plans in place, the part that these people played in ensuring that they did what was expected of them, not just on the track, but the protocols, ensuring that people were following the requirements, I think that was outstanding. So I have to commend all the schools as organizations, as well as the individuals, the students and coaches and management staff of all the different persons. For me, in terms of what we were trying to accomplish, you look at Xavier Brown from JC. I'm not sure how many of us outside of those who have a very close interest in track and field knew who Xavier Brown was.
Xavier Brown.
Xavier Brown. And you look at the end of the championship, record holder for the 400-meter hurdles, sub 46 for the 400.
And almost a triple champion.
Almost. Well, I think there's an appeal. So let us say possibly a triple champion.
Okay. Yes.
So and I'm sure there are other stories. There's one story that Jeffrey and I will probably speak about sometime in the future. Those are these are stories that tells us that this was worth it.
Yeah.
And we feel a sense of accomplishment in terms of what we were able to get from our student athletes. And we think that at the end of the day, Jamaica is better for it. The feedback has been good generally, but we want to really, really thank all the stakeholders who played their part in making this happen.
Yeah, sounds amazing.
Of course, my own personal motto, success is about what happens next. So everything that took place last week has now become an achievement. If we're going to talk about success, we have to talk about the scheduling for next year and so forth. All right?
Yeah, glad that you're looking ahead. And you didn't say it, Mr. Wellington, but congratulations to one of the most impressive teams at Champs this year. Your school, St. Elizabeth Technical, especially on the boys' side. Great job done by Coach Ronaldo Walcott. Your athletes just looked in supreme form. It's almost as if they knew the schedule from beforehand.
I think the advantage. I think the advantage they had, Ricardo, is that they know their principal, and while others may have had doubt, they believed in him and they knew there was going to be a chance. I think that's the advantage they had.
Well done. Thanks very much to Keith Wellington, President of the Intersecondary School Sports Association, Jeffrey Gordon, the manager of the St. Jago girls team, and of course, Anisha McLaughlin-Wilby. What a girls' champs career she had. She was amazing. And when we have that discussion of the greatest of all times at Champs,
one of the first listed,
Anisha McLaughlin will be among the first on that list. Thank you very much, lady and gentlemen. It was a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having us.
As you mentioned the point about the team preparation, I probably should go across the set and see what their football team is doing. So we can have some idea as to what may or may not happen in September, Ricardo.
That's a very good one. That's a very good one. Well, the local Premier League has gotten the green light, so let's see if high school football can do the same. I still think it is going to be difficult. And I'm
obviously more difficult than Champs, yes.
I am nowhere near as confident as I was a year ago that Champs could be held in 2021. And part of the reason you really have to congratulate ISSA and Keith Wellington as president, and he probably wouldn't say this, but up until the morning of Champs, there were still doubts about whether the event would go ahead.
Why?
We can't say everything, Donald, but there were doubts. And I would say as much as we easily could have heard that Champs was called off. But yeah, ISSA and Keith Wellington, I really think they have done an amazing job. I personally think for a long time, ISSA has been one of, if not the best sporting organization in the country, in Jamaica. And after what they've been able to do this year, I think you can take out the one of and just simply say ISSA is right now the best sporting organization in the country.
Thing is that they have the evidence to show.
They sure do.
They've pulled off Champs 2021, and I thought they did a fabulous job in doing so. I believe that all the stakeholders would be really happy with what took place in the end. And of course, the main stakeholder, the kids, being able to compete, being able to perform, being able to put their names out there. A lot of them looking forward to the scholarships that will now surely come. So I'm happy for them the most.
Yeah, I'm happy for them as well, and happy for everyone involved. And as Keith Wellington said, well, that aspect is now history. That's not the word he used, was it? He didn't say history. But we're looking forward to success. Yes, we are. We're looking forward to success, and I'm looking forward to a successful staging of the 100 finals on Wednesday, come the 2022 championships at the National Stadium. Thanks very much again to Keith Wellington, Anisha McLaughlin-Wilby, and Jeffrey Gordon, my co-host Donald Oliver. My name is Ricardo Chambers. This has been another edition of the Commentators Podcast.
This is their house, this is their stage, it's the stage they have dominated in recent years.